Authors Edgar Allan Poe by Biography.com. Synopsis. Born on January 19th, 1809, in Boston, Massachusetts, American short story writer, poet, critic, and editor Edgar Allan Poe's tales of mystery initiated the modern detective story. In addition, the atmosphere in his tales of horror is unrivaled in American fiction. His The Raven, 1845, numbers among the best known poems in national literature. Early life. With his short stories and poems, Edgar Allan Poe captured the imagination and interest of readers around the world. His creative talents led to the beginning of different literary genres, earning him the nickname Father of the Detective Story, among other distinctions. His life, however, is a bit of a mystery itself, and the lines between fact and fiction have been blurred substantially since his death. The son of actors, Poe never really knew his parents. His father left the family early on, and his mother passed away when he was only 3. Separated from his siblings, Poe went on to live with John and Frances Allen, a successful tobacco merchant, and his wife in Richmond, Virginia. He and Frances seemed to form a bond, but he never quite meshed with John. Preferring poetry over profits, Poe reportedly wrote poems on the back of some of Allen's business papers. Money caused a problem between Poe and Allen. When Poe went to the University of Virginia in 1826, he didn't receive enough funds from Allen to cover all his costs. Poe turned to gambling to cover the difference, but ended up in debt. He returned home only to face another personal setback. His neighbor and fiancee, Elmira Royster, had become engaged to someone else. Heartbroken and frustrated, Poe left the Allens. His writing career begins. At first, Poe seemed to be harboring twin aspirations. Poe published his first book, Tamerlane and Other Poems, in 1827, and he had joined the army around this time. Poe wanted to go to West Point, a military academy, and won a spot there in 1830. Before going to West Point, he published a second collection called El Aref, Tamerlane, and Minor Poems in 1829. Poe excelled at his studies at West Point, but he was kicked out after a year for his poor handling of his duties. Some have speculated that he intentionally sought to be court martialed during his time at West Point. Poe had fought with his foster father, and Allen decided to sever ties with him. After leaving the academy, Poe focused on writing full time. He moved around in search of opportunity, living in New York City, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Richmond from 1831 to 1835. He stayed in Baltimore with his aunt, Maria Clem, and her daughter, Virginia. His young cousin became a literary inspiration to Poe as well as his love interest. The couple married in 1836 when she was only 13, or 14 as some sources say, years old. Returning to Richmond in 1835, Poe went to work for a magazine called the Southern Literary Messenger. There, he developed a reputation as a cutthroat critic, writing vicious reviews of his contemporaries. Poe also published some of his own works in the magazine, including 2 parts of his only novel, The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym. His tenure there proved short, however. Poe's aggressive reviewing style and sometimes combative personality strained his relationship with the publication, and he left the magazine in 1837. His problems with alcohol also played a role in his departure, according to some reports. Poe went on to a brief stint at 2 other publications, Burton's Gentleman's Magazine and the Broadway Journal, The Fall of the House of Usher and The Raven. In the late 1830s, Poe published Tales of the Grotesque and Arabesque, a collection of stories. It contains several of his most spine-tingling tales, including The Fall of the House of Usher, Ligeia, and William Wilson. Poe launched a new genre of detective fiction with 1841's The Murders in the Rue Morgue. A writer on the rise, he won a literary prize in 1843 for The Gold Bug, a suspenseful tale of secret codes and treasure hunting. Poe became a literary sensation in 1845 with the publication of the poem The Raven. It is considered a great American literary work and one of Poe's best. In the work, Poe explored some of his common themes: death, loss. The narrator laments the demise of his great love, Lenore. A raven flies into his room. It replies nevermore to every question the narrator poses. That same year, he found himself under attack for his stinging criticisms of fellow poet Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Poe claimed that Longfellow, a widely popular literary figure, was a plagiarist, and this written assault on Longfellow created a backlash for Poe. Continuing work in different forms, Poe examined his own methodology in writing in general in several essays, including the philosophy of composition, the poetic principle, and the rationale of verse. He also produced another thrilling tale, The Cask of Amontillado, and poems such as Ulalume and The Bells. His mysterious death. Poe was overcome by grief after the death of his beloved Virginia in 1847. While he continued to work, he suffered from poor health and struggled financially. His final days remain a mystery. He left Richmond on September 27th, 1849, and was supposedly on his way to Philadelphia. On October 3rd, Poe was found in Baltimore in great distress. He was taken to Washington College Hospital, where he died on October 7th. His last words were, "Lord, help my poor soul." At that time, it was said that Poe died of congestion of the brain, but his actual cause of death has been the subject of endless speculation. Some experts believe that alcoholism led to his death, while others offer alternative theories. Rabies, epilepsy, and carbon monoxide poisoning are just some of the conditions thought to have led to the great writer's demise. Shortly after his passing, Poe's reputation was badly damaged by his literary adversary, Rufus Griswold. Griswold, who had been sharply criticized by Poe, took his revenge in his obituary of Poe, portraying the gifted yet troubled writer as a mentally deranged drunkard and womanizer. He also penned the first biography of Poe, which helped to cement some of these misconceptions in the public mind. While he never had financial success in his lifetime, Poe became one of America's most enduring writers. His works are as compelling today as they were more than a century ago. A bright, imaginative thinker, Poe crafted stories and poems that still shock, surprise, and move modern readers.